What if I told you that the worst year to be alive wasn't during World War II, wasn't during the Black Death, but more than 1,000 years earlier, in a time when the sun vanished, crops failed, and millions died without knowing why? It was the year 536 AD, a year so catastrophic that historians now call it the beginning of the Darkest Age. Across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, people looked up at the sky and saw only darkness. What caused this global nightmare? And could it happen again? This is not science fiction. This is history. Scribes from Ireland to China recorded a chilling phenomenon. The sun stopped shining. For 18 months, the world was trapped in a ghostly twilight. Byzantine historian Procopius wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon. Temperatures dropped drastically. Crops withered. Snow fell in summer, and famine spread like wildfire. Modern science now confirms what ancient scribes could only fearfully describe: a massive volcanic eruption, likely in Iceland or North America, sent ash and sulfur into the atmosphere, cloaking the Earth in a sun-blocking veil. Ice core samples from Greenland and Antarctica show a massive spike in volcanic debris in 536 AD. This wasn't just a bad year. It was the start of a chain reaction. Temperatures dropped by up to 2.5 degrees Celsius. It might sound small, but for a fragile agrarian society, it was catastrophic. Crops failed across continents. In China, summer snow fell. In Mesopotamia, drought turned fertile fields to dust. Europe was plunged into a bitter chill. With no food came starvation. In Ireland, chronicles recorded a failure of bread from 536 to 539. Desperation led to horror. People resorted to eating bark, leather, and even the flesh of the dead. The social structure began to break down. And then, as if things couldn't possibly get worse, came the plague. In 541 AD, just 5 years after the eruption, the first wave of the bubonic plague, the plague of Justinian, swept through the Eastern Roman Empire. It killed 30 to 50 million people. Constantinople alone saw up to 10,000 deaths per day. The global population shrank. Cities fell silent. Trade collapsed. Armies dissolved. This wasn't just a health crisis. It was the beginning of civilizational collapse. The Byzantine Empire, already weakened by war and internal decay, began to fracture. Britain saw increased Saxon advances as native populations crumbled. In China, dynasties fell and civil unrest boiled over. In the Americas, the Teotihuacan civilization began to fade. In Scandinavia, fear of the world ending inspired myth. Some believe it was during this time that the Norse concept of Ragnarok gained prominence. And behind it all, a volcano. Nature's silent assassin. Scientists believe that the 536 eruption was followed by 2 more in 540 and 547, creating a volcanic triple punch. The Earth didn't fully recover for almost 100 years. Tree rings from around the globe show stunted growth for decades, a biological record of planetary suffering. What makes 536 AD so chilling is not just the death and despair, but the eerie silence that accompanied it. No one knew why the sun had dimmed. No one understood the science. They only saw the sky go dark and felt the world unravel beneath them. This period, from 536 to around 660 AD, is now known as the Late Antique Little Ice Age. It was an age of cold, hunger, disease, and death, but also an age of change. From the ashes, new powers rose. Islam emerged in the Middle East. Europe began shifting toward the medieval kingdoms that would define the next era. Humanity endured. But the terror of 536 still haunts us. Because this could happen again. Volcanoes still sleep beneath our feet. The world is even more interconnected and far more dependent on global supply chains, food systems, and electricity. One eruption of the magnitude of 536 today could plunge the Earth into a modern dark age. Airplanes grounded, crops dead, economies shattered, panic unleashed. The story of 536 AD is not just a tragic chapter in history. It's a warning. Because history doesn't always repeat itself with fanfare. Sometimes it comes back with a whisper, a shadow, and a cold wind that never leaves. Remember this: the greatest disasters don't always start with an explosion. Sometimes they begin when the sun stops shining. But let's dig deeper. What did daily life look like for someone trapped in this catastrophe? Imagine a peasant in Gaul or Anatolia. You wake up and there's frost on the ground in July. Your livestock are dying. Your neighbors are disappearing. The priests say the gods are angry. The sky never turns blue. Children don't play outside anymore. They're too weak. Religious panic spread. In some regions, desperate rituals and mass conversions took place. People abandoned their faiths in favor of new beliefs they hoped would appease the forces punishing them. Christianity gained a surge in converts in many parts of Europe. In the East, Buddhism and Taoism saw surges in devotional fervor. People were looking for answers, for salvation, for meaning in the dark. In Constantinople, Emperor Justinian faced impossible odds. His ambitious building projects, including the Hagia Sophia, were overshadowed by mass death. His armies were weakened, his treasuries drained, his cities on the brink. Yet he pressed on, clinging to the last hope of a crumbling empire. Art from this period is rare, but what exists reflects the despair and mysticism of the time. In some surviving frescoes and manuscripts, you see apocalyptic imagery, comets, black suns, and skeletal figures cloaked in mist. Death had become not just a presence, but a muse. Trade routes, the lifelines of the ancient world, were disrupted. The Silk Road quieted. Maritime activity along the Mediterranean slowed dramatically. Merchants stopped traveling. Goods stopped flowing. And with them, information stopped too. Entire cultures became isolated. News from distant lands turned into rumor, myth, or was lost entirely. It was in this eerie silence that legends were born. It is believed that King Arthur's legend gained traction during this period of decline, a story of a once great king who would return in the time of Britain's greatest need, a glimmer of hope amidst collapse. Even nature seemed to recoil. Animals migrated strangely, rivers froze earlier, harvest cycles became unpredictable, superstitions intensified. Anything unexplained was blamed on divine wrath or celestial forces. And yet, through it all, humanity survived. Slowly, painfully, piece by piece. When the skies finally cleared decades later, the world had changed. The Roman world had eroded further. Old cities had vanished. Languages evolved. New powers rose in the void left by the old. The scars of 536 remained in culture and memory. In Icelandic sagas, in Chinese chronicles, in medieval annals, echoes of that dark time persisted. Today, with satellites, seismographs, and global communication, we have better tools to predict such cataclysms. But our fragility remains. A single supervolcano, like Yellowstone, or a massive undersea eruption, could mimic 536's horror. Scientists study 536 not just as a historical curiosity, but as a model for what could happen in the 21st century. And some believe we're overdue. Food security experts warn that a major crop failure, like the one in 536 today, could trigger famine in multiple continents, given how monocultures dominate modern agriculture. A single volcanic winter could send global food prices soaring, incite riots, and trigger refugee crises on an unprecedented scale. The true lesson of 536 is not that it was the worst year in history. It's that humanity was caught completely off guard, and that it happened not once, but multiple times. It reminds us that the natural world doesn't bend to our systems, that it only takes one moment to unravel the threads of civilization. So when you look at the sky on a bright summer day, be grateful for the warmth, the light, the normalcy, and remember that in 536 AD, that sky turned cold, grey, and silent. And no one knew why.